Okay, our next speaker is Clark Asay from Brigham. And then we have 22 minutes, suggest 15 to 7. Yeah.
All right. It's sort of cruel to put someone from sort of the West Coast in the first morning session right after dinner, but so it is. I'm looking forward to your feedback, and I'll sort of, in order to set the stage for that feedback, let me give you a brief overview of what I'm trying to do here. And I'll try to be as brief as possible because I would rather hear your comments and feedback on this topic. So in this paper, the informational value patents, what I'm trying to do is assess the patent pledging phenomenon and the role that patents play as part of that phenomenon. When I say it's patent pledging phenomenon, what I mean is these situations where parties are voluntarily committing to limit their patent rights in some way. So Tesla is the example that's on a lot of people's mind, right, where they agreed to publicly in a blog post, Elon Musk, not to assert their patents offensively for those using their patents in good faith. Toyota followed a short time later with their own patent pledge. There are numerous other examples that can be cited. George and American University have done, they have now a catalog of these types of pledges. I think last count there were, that I saw 160, 100 or so listed on their website, implicating thousands, if not tens of thousands of patents. So my main argument is just to throw them up here now, explain as we go what I mean a bit more in detail with respect to these arguments is, I think this patent pledging phenomenon shows that patents have informational value that has gone unexplored previously. And if I'll talk about some work that has been done in this area, but I really appreciate pointers to additional literature that you think is relevant on this point. And I think that exclusive rights and information disclosures, information law, information disclosure requirements of patent law are a key part of creating this value. Okay, so in order to explain better what I mean, just throw up, I've cherry-picked a few examples here. Like I said before, there are hundreds of possibilities that you could point to. But Tesla, Twitter, Microsoft have all made significant patent pledges in recent years. And I think, what I'm not trying to do here is lay out precisely what the economic motivations are of these parties in making these pledges, because I think those are relatively straightforward in most cases. So Tesla, right, the pledge I just mentioned, I think this is, a lot of the analysis that I've seen is, right, this is just a networks effect story. In the blog post, Elon Musk says, we can't do this alone. We're going to be best served with more and more people adopting electronic car technology. And so we're going to devote our patent portfolio to that cause. We hope everybody joins us and collaborates in making this a widely adopted standard beyond just Mark Lemley and others that have Teslas currently. Twitter, right, made a pledge a number of years ago basically saying we won't assert our patents offensively unless we get agreement from the employees responsible for the patenting technology. So again, committing to limit their patent rights. Again, with some of the analysis that I've seen on this point in terms of economic motivation, it's a recruiting tool, right? You're empowering employees, giving them, thank you, back some rights in a sense, and so the economic motivation, at least one of the economic motivations in undertaking that step is somewhat straightforward. Microsoft, if you were not aware, they have a number of web pages dedicated to laying out a number of different types of patent pledges, some devoted to open source software developers that are sort of perceived for, right, no mystery that they've been perceived as sort of the arch nemesis of the open source software movement. And so, right, the economic motivation of some of those pledges perhaps to curry some favor in developer communities where they typically haven't had that type of favor. It might be, right, to curry favor in capital markets. Right, we're recognizing the changing times, we're adapting, we're not just sort of sticking to our ways, at least always, anyway. Okay, so again, I think the economic motivations of the type of pledges are not a mystery in many cases. But what I think is less straightforward is the role that patents play as part of these pledges. Why are patents involved at all, right? Companies could simply announce their intentions. Tesla could have posted the same blog post without any mention of patents. They could simply forego pursuing patents, right? They give some reasons why they pursued patents in the first place, but Elon Musk suggests, we're sort of misinformed about the role patents play. Now we're trying a different approach. And in the standard setting organization context, right, you might think, well, with the extensive focus on patent holdup problems, well, the role that patents are playing in these pledging scenarios is simply removing them, getting them out of the way, right, so that innovation can occur. My argument here is that actually patents in these patent pledging contexts have a more positive role, and it's an informational role. That these patent pledgers are using patents to send signals to labor, capital, and product markets about their innovation preferences, about themselves in general, and the patents are actually a pretty useful tool or asset in this regard. And I'll explain now a bit more how. So patent signaling, there has been scholarship about patent signaling, the informational value of patents in this regard. Clarissa Long has an article, I think, from 2002 on this point. And it's basically, the story is, right, the reason companies are obtaining so many patents when patents individually are often sort of worthless is because it's a signal to capital markets that, hey, we're doing noteworthy things, right? You obtain patents, investors might have a difficult time observing characteristics about the company, but patents are a way for them to sort of infer things about you. Those guys are doing innovative things, we should invest in them, okay? I think the patent pledging phenomenon goes beyond just that story. I think it shows that companies are using patents as signals to capital markets as well, in addition to labor and product markets. Now a little bit more about signaling theory in general. There's other disciplines. Signaling theory is pretty well developed. Just a few points about what makes signals effective. One, if you're engaging in costly behavior, that makes your signal more credible to outside observers. Okay, and it's more credible in the sense that it may help parties verify or observe information about you that would otherwise be difficult to infer or to observe. So I think in the patent pledging context, right, this is happening. So again, think of the example of Tesla. If they had simply announced their intentions without any sort of mention of patents, well, that wouldn't have really been all that noteworthy, right? We want to collaborate with everyone. We want everyone to adopt electronic car technology. Everyone already knew that, right? But they have this valuable economic right, patents. They sacrifice it. That makes, right, their message more credible about collaboration. It also allows third parties, observers to infer characteristics about a company. They really are serious about collaboration. They are collaborative. That's the model they're adopting. They are a collaborative company. Twitter, right? If you want to communicate to current and potential employees a certain company culture that is appealing, right? You want to work for us, you should come here. Again, you take these economic rights, valuable economic rights, you sacrifice them, okay? As part of a pledge, you empower employees. That makes the message more credible. You can infer characteristics about the company. They really are an innovative place. They really are perhaps somewhere where I want to be and to work. And then capital markets, again, this signaling story that has previously been articulated we obtained patents, therefore you can infer that we're a really innovative place. I think it goes beyond that, right? Like with the Microsoft example, if Microsoft had simply said, right, we're sort of moving forward, we're adopting or adapting to the changing times, it's a harder story to believe than if they sacrifice these economic rights, at least some of them, right? We know with their multi-billion-dollar licensing program with respect to Android and Linux that they still are, right, using patents in other ways too, but at least in part with respect to .NET technologies and others, right, they're putting their money where their mouth is, okay? And that's a more credible signal because of patents and exclusive rights being involved. So really briefly, I think some implications of this story. You know, disclosure theorists and patent law theory in general typically assume that patent holders suffer an information loss as part of the patent process, right? Disclosure theory, you quid pro quo. You give up, right, your secrets, and we'll give you exclusive rights. But I think this patent pledging phenomenon, at least in some industries and contexts, shows that patents can have informational value to the patent holder too. And that's a value that we should consider more thoroughly in articulating patent law and policy and thinking about how it should be reformed or stay the same and so forth. Okay? It also, right, disclosure theorists assume, well, they have these very vigorous debates about whether patents actually disclose useful information. There's a lot of doubters about whether they do. I think, right, in the patent pledging context, a lot of the main concerns as to why patents may not disclose valuable information disappear, right? If you have a permissive patent pledge, you're going to be less concerned about willful infringement, for instance. The patents have also been highlighted and identified for you in many cases, which makes it more likely that they will not simply be ignored or never found. Tesla, Twitter, after they made their pledges, there were, I found a number of analyses of their patent portfolios specifically in response to their pledges, right? And so I think the second related point is that informational value of patents goes up for the consuming public as well, addressing a lot of the concerns of those that have discussed these concerns in the disclosure theory context. The last implication that I'll point to is that, right, I think this informational value of patent story suggests perhaps that patents are more multidimensional than assumed, at least, specifically with respect to traditional patent law theories, right, which all suggest that exclusive rights are the real prize of patents, right? That may be so for a number of reasons. It leads to commercialization, leads to inventive activity in the first place. Exclusive rights are important in this story too, but for different reasons because of the informational signals that I was mentioning before. Now, this may be mostly true, and the informational value that I'm pointing to may be mostly present in certain industries, right? IT in particular, pharmaceutical industry, biotechnology, maybe that these types of uses of patents are not occurring. But I think that just plugs into the larger debate and discussion of industry-specific tailoring, given the differences in technology and innovation that occurs in those different industries, and that if we are going to take into account informational value of patents in developing law and policy, we need to be cognizant of the industry-specific differences in terms of how patents are used. I'll skip this last slide. I talk a bit about recent Supreme Court patent law cases and what their impact may be in terms of the informational value that I discussed in the paper, but I would like to hear your comments and questions and such rather than that. So.
I think this project and the subject are really, really interesting. So I have two things. One is, I was years ago involved with a project called Green Exchange that, I don't know, you may have read about it. Creative Commons was trying to design a patent pledge, basically, that could be used publicly. Nike, Yahoo, and Best Buy, these unlikely bedfellows, were involved in this project. They had contributed patents basically via this pledge. And there were some funny things about it. One is when I looked at the patents, and I wrote about this in, it was a 2011 article in Northwestern University Law Review. When you look at the patents, many of them were like near the end of life. So it led me to wonder, was this just a mechanism for good PR and sort of a patent landfill maybe? So that was just one thing that might be useful. And the other thing is, a puzzle that's always kind of bugged me is if I'm a company and I have a bunch of patents, I could, and I see some value in contributing them to the public, why would I prefer to pledge them and presumably continue to pay maintenance fees as opposed to just commit them to the public, basically stopping maintenance fees? And I think there used to be some mechanism through PTO by which you could just publicly dedicate a patent. So that was just something that I may have mentioned in that article, I don't remember, but that never made sense to me. I always wondered if companies that were pledging patents always wanted to hold on to them just in case that they could pull them back. And maybe you've learned about this more than I ever did.
Yeah, there may be that. With that said, it seems sort of incongruous with the pledge itself to then sort of think, well, this might not be enforceable, or we could get away with asserting them, or just sort of leave us some wiggle room. I think, you know, my paper suggests that one of the reasons why they might not dedicate them to the public in the way sort of public domain type of dedication, or it is because it has informational value to do it the way that they are doing.
Okay.
So that's part of the story that I'm trying to tell, is that their signal is more credible if they're sort of retaining the rights, but then purporting to sacrifice them.
Well, related to that last question, have you looked at, you know, kind of the broader practices? Of course, I see everything through a trade secret lens, but, you know, are they making these patent pledges, but then secretly, you know, keeping things as trade secrets, you know, the kind of fill in, you know, what are their non-compete policies or non-disclosure policies? You know, in other words, how much are they truly committed to an open innovation model as opposed to just like wanting the good press of making a pledge?
Yeah, and I don't think those are necessarily incompatible, right? It really depends on, I think that's very relevant, depending on what the message is or what the signal is intended to be. So that would be really interesting to look in terms of Tesla, because if they are, I mean, their pledge is pretty permissive, covers the entire portfolio. It's not one of these pledges like Microsoft where they carefully select certain specifications and say anything outside of that, you know, business as usual. And so, right, I guess I haven't done that yet in terms of looking at their more specific practices to assess whether their signal is, right, what I guess the scope of it is, or whether it's as credible as they might suggest on the blog post, or another other aspects. I'll have to think about that more, but I haven't done that. So,
and, you know, I guess it's a sort of related point, right? So in any of these pledges, so if I'm, let's say, I want to be a startup car manufacturer, right? I have to believe in the credibility of Tesla's pledge, right? Not just that these patents that they've identified will be available to me, but that all their future research and development is going to be available to me and whatever's coming down the pipeline. And so in any of these situations, I just find it hard to believe that the intended recipients of the information have reason to believe that the companies are being credible in a way that they can enforce, right? So there's just no way for you know, Ford or anyone else to say, well, Tesla, you went out there and then 2 years later you patented something.
Yeah.
So where's the credibility in the pledge? That's
Yeah, and I fully agree that if I'm a sort of competing car company, I'm not going to rely on the pledge and sort of move it forward. I'm going to go out and strike an agreement to get the terms and conditions put in place. But I do think as an initial matter, sort of the signal, it's sort of more of like an invitation. It's not sort of the end-all be-all. It's more of an invitation that, hey, we want to do this. And we are serious about this because we have posted this blog, right? We posted this blog and said, this is what we want to do, and we're making all our patents available to anyone who wants them. I do think that there's going to be follow-up, that the company wants to take them at their word and sort of get an agreement in place. But I think the initial move, as an informational matter, does have greater credibility because of the involvement of the patents.
So I'm just wondering how much this informational value is dependent on current public opinion and has recently arisen because patents aren't cool right now, right? So maybe there wasn't this signaling function, 10 or 15 years ago where no one really worried about, kind of over patenting, and will the signaling function go away in the future if public opinion shifts again?
This is not a value, I think, that it has to be present. It doesn't mean that it's not a possibility. So yeah, if public opinion shifts, this could affect sort of how companies act, which then could mean that they're not using patents in these ways, and therefore the informational value, potential informational value of patents is not being utilized. But I still think that it's still latent, right? It still can be used, and if times change such that it becomes sort of a useful way to utilize patents, then that informational value is there, and they are useful as information tools.
Right on time.
Okay, thanks.